Have you ever heard of the British Roswell? We're here to talk about it. This is Aliens and Stuff. Hi everyone and welcome to Aliens and Stuff. My name's Mike, this is Tom and Spencer, and today we are here to talk about the British version of Roswell. It's well documented and well known as British Roswell. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe to the page, and I'm going to pass to Tom this time to tell you a little bit more about what this incident's about, because it's an interesting one, Tom, isn't it?
It is an interesting one, and there's quite a lot of evidence for this. So,
first of all, though, do we want to go down the route of first impressions? Okay.
Yeah,
Spencer? What do you think this is?
I'm completely unsure.
You're undecided.
Completely undecided.
That's interesting. I am as well.
I'm saying it's paranormal.
Really?
100%.
Tell us more.
Okay. So I'm going to give you the reason why and just a little bit of a rundown. Obviously, boys, feel free to jump in as and when, because I know you've done your research.
Yeah.
But effectively, in December 1980, there was a twinned Air Force base, called Ben Porter's Air Force Base, which is the American side of the base, and it was RAF Woodbridge, which was the British side.
And this is in
Suffolk.
Oh, right, in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in Suffolk in the UK, and on the Rendlesham Air Force Base in December 1980, there was about 3 a.m, there was a soldier who was out doing a perimeter walk, as they do, all right? It's during the Cold War time, so obviously, as standard, they have to have everybody like on alert, if you will. And basically, a soldier sees a red light in the sky, and he's watching it for a few minutes, and then it suddenly rapidly descends down into the forest, right? And he was like 3 a.m, and he actually said that he pinched himself a little bit to see if he hadn't fallen asleep and he wasn't in the middle of daydreaming or anything.
Yeah.
And he looked out in the forest, and there was a dull red glow coming from the forest. So his initial reaction was, oh, something might have crashed, okay? 2 other Air Force personnel also witnessed this and came over to him, all right? And their names were Pennison and Burrows, okay? Now, Pennison and Burrows are like, right, let's go and have a little look. There might be somebody injured, there might be something down, let's go and have a little look. So all 3 of them jump in a jeep, they head out towards the perimeter of the forest, okay? Now, when they get there, one of them remains back, and Burrows and Pennison go a little bit further on. Now, when they get to the outline of where the forest really starts to get a bit deeper, if you will, Burrows is like, I don't really want to go any further. This is all a bit kind of weird for me. Pennison's like, I want to go and I want to have a little look, right? So he goes in, and he sees several lights, and he goes for a little bit further, and he comes across, a craft. But actually, before I get onto that, we actually have a map of where the base is in the UK, which we'll pull up quickly before I forget. Okay, so you can see RAF Woodbridge here and Rendlesham Forest, right? They're actually part of the same thing, all right?
So the forest is like literally.
The forest is on the outside. It's by the east gate is where the forest is, right? So that's where they are at this point. And Pennison goes into the forest, and he allegedly comes across a triangular shaped craft, right? Which was landed with 3 gear down on the floor, and he said it was like a black metallic, but it wasn't quite metallic, it's more like a glass.
We've got a drawing of that,
We have got a drawing of it, which he drew himself.
And it's Pennison that drew this?
Pennison drew this. It's a bit rudimentary, but he said it had several lights, and very interestingly, it had writing on it, but he described it as like hieroglyphics.
Wow.
Okay. Now, he observed it for a few minutes, got close to it, and decided that he was going to touch it.
Wow.
Now, when he touched it, he suddenly found himself 30 feet back from the craft, and he didn't know how he got there. It was like instantaneous. He went up and touched it. He said it was freezing cold, and then he was back.
So he didn't touch it and got thrown back?
No.
He literally touched it.
Touched it and then found himself. He didn't get thrown.
So he was almost like teleported
Wasn't injured.
back. Okay.
No marks, no nothing on him, just suddenly found himself back. Okay. So, gets a bit freaked out, goes back, grabs the other 2 guys that he was originally with, and they go and tell the personnel at the base, right? And effectively, the personnel at the base are like, it's flights of fancy, your boys are seeing stuff, nothing. They try and dismiss it. And they're a bit freaked out. They're like, I don't understand why in the middle of the Cold War, we allegedly see something that's crashed on a UFO base, something's appeared there, and you guys aren't taking it seriously. Bit weird.
Okay.
Now, Lieutenant Halt, who we also have, Colonel Halt actually, sorry.
He's a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel, but it's both. This chap here, on the right-hand side. This is him at the time, and obviously this is him today. All
Yeah.
right. Now he was obviously higher up, and he took it a little bit more seriously and was like, well, it's a
Because
bit
he wasn't actually on he wasn't on shift that night, was he?
He wasn't
came on the next morning.
He wasn't on shift, but he was like, well, I'll take it with a little bit more interest, but nothing more than that. Okay. So, and it's also worth noting actually that Heathrow Airport reported a bogey going down in that area.
On radar?
On radar.
Wow.
So there was a radar hit to detect this, all right? Which would say it was something nuts and bolts, as opposed to like a light or weather phenomenon, I would assume, okay? So anyway, the following evening, okay, he's in the mess hall and somebody comes up to Halt and says, it's back. So he immediately thinks, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab gear because I'm not going to be that guy who goes out and says, I saw something and have no evidence to back it up. So he took floodlights, he took instrumentation to measure like radiation.
Geiger counters.
Yep, Geiger counters bits,
Yep.
and he also took a dictaphone with him, right?
Okay.
Okay, so which is like a audio recording device.
Yeah.
We will use iPhones a bit nowadays, but obviously it's way before that, okay? So he decides to go out and he grabs some men, but he doesn't take Pennison with him.
Right.
He only takes Burrows to show him where he went last night, to take him out there. And he purposely didn't take the other two guys with him because he didn't want to have any kind of, he didn't want to muddy the water and people assuming they were going to go find something. Okay. He wanted it as a fresh blanket he was going to see for himself. So he takes some guys out there with him, right? When they get out there, they set up the floodlights, they flicker on and off and they don't work. First bit of eeriness, bit weird, okay?
Okay.
But effectively, they go into the forest, okay, and they see some lights.
Right.
So they're going through and they're like looking at it, and there's like a red orb, there's a blue orb, and it's moving around the trees. They also look up and they see scarring on the trees, right?
Yeah, branches have been removed.
Branches are being removed. There was like trees had like burn marks on them, and when they used their like Geiger counters, they were slightly higher than background radiation. All right, but nothing ridiculously
I think it was
high.
0.07 rotogens.
As
wasn't
opposed
it?
to like it's usually like 0.3 or
0.04
something. It's normal.
yeah.
So it was a little bit higher than average, but okay. And then effectively, what happens after that is then there's almost like a dance with these lights that go around the forest, and he switches on his dictaphone. And this recording, which you can find online, we've got a little snippet here, which we'll play in a second. But he records what happens via voice. Because
There's about 20 minutes of it, isn't there?
it's about just shy of 20 minutes, but it's the last bit which we've got here because I think that's the most powerful bit. And we'll play it in a second, but if you listen to his voice and you can hear the other guys around him, he's definitely there when he used it at the time. And if we got that clip there, we can pull up Spanks of the audio.
0315, now we've got an object about 10 degrees directly south, 10 degrees off the horizon. And the ones in the north are moving, one's moving away from us. It's moving out fast.
This one on the right heading away too.
Yeah, we're both heading north. So here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is unreal. 330 or 0330, and the objects are still in the sky, although the one to the south looks like it's losing a little bit of altitude. We're turning around and heading back toward the base. The object to the south is still beaming down lights to the ground.
So these are lights hitting beams down to the ground, right? And you can tell in his voice there that he's like quite scared and he's taken back by it. So this is several army personnel, and if you listen to the whole thing, it is quite interesting, but obviously we're not going to stick 20 minutes up on the screen, and we'll put the link in the description for you. But he does sound quite scared. He's very unsure what's going on. This isn't just lights, one light, it's several lights. And effectively at the end, they dance around, they go out into a clearing, into a field, and basically these like 2 or 3 lights separate into 4, and then they all shoot off. So they go back up.
You can hear as well in that recording, from the research that I've done as well, is that he almost describes what he's seeing as almost like a red eye, with the centre of it being like the pupil, like a black pupil.
I didn't put that bit
and
in there, but
it's dancing around the forest, essentially.
It's like it's winking at
them. And it's
him.
almost winking at them.
100%,
which is different though to what they reported seeing the night before.
Yes, the nuts and bolts triangular craft was not reported on night 2.
No.
All right. So that's one thing which we'll get into a little bit down the line, which is a bit. But I think definitely something was there and something happened.
Okay.
100%. All right. Now, I know you effectively, they then report this and Halt effectively writes a memo to the Ministry of Defence in the UK because the US weren't interested.
The British weren't either, though, were they?
They weren't. It took him days to investigate it, to be fair.
They didn't, though, investigate it, from what I've been told.
They
decided it wasn't a threat to national security, so they didn't look into it further.
Yeah. But apparently they did send some people down to, well, obviously he wrote the memo and he sent that off to them. And they did keep it because they classified it and it got released under the Freedom of Information
And they
Act
did
later.
do some more investigation with the Geiger counters again. They also did the indentations from the first night of the triangular craft when it sat down. They took casts with, past.
But I would say Penderson did that on his own.
But they've got them still.
Yeah, he has. But he did that on his own without anybody else there.
And but they've also taken radiation on the Geiger counter, readings of those, and they did spike higher.
100%. But that's it in a nutshell, right? Spence, what do you think so far? What have you got to
Well, I mean, what I found really, really interesting about this one is there's a lot of conjecture as to what was actually said at the time. So, I mean, obviously we're talking about Penderson and Burroughs.
Yes.
Yeah? So Burroughs didn't really seem to buy into it.
No, he was a bit unsure, but he also didn't go any further, did he?
He said, so in 1997, Burroughs said to James Easton, who's a Scottish researcher, he said...
It's nearly 10 years later.
Yeah, nearly 10 years later. We could see a beacon going around, so we went towards it. We followed it for about 2 miles before we could see it was coming from a lighthouse. However, there was an earlier statement made, I can't remember whether it was Halt or Penderson, but they said that they could see it independent of the lighthouse.
Yes.
So,
well, from what I understand,
contrasting stories.
Talking about that, it was the angle. So, they're saying a lot of them were saying was that this. Bring up the map again, if you could, Spings. The alien spacecraft that they allegedly saw was more like northwest, whereas the lighthouse, as you can see on that map, is more kind of nearly due west from where they were.
See,
also, the back of that lighthouse.
East. It's northeast is where they said it was coming. So it's different angles.
So this is the thing, there was this disparity between the two of them, where one said it was the lighthouse and the other one said, well, it was independent of the lighthouse. So they could see the lighthouse allegedly, but it was a distinct entity away from. This was
an excuse that a lot of people, the debunkers, used to discredit this event completely, saying that it was the lighthouse that they were seeing, which was what was called the. I can't remember the name of the lighthouse now. Yeah, but the lighthouse.
The Orphaness Lighthouse.
Orphaness Lighthouse. They said that as the light was going like that, as they saw it like this, they thought it was a flash or flashing in the few of the trees, and obviously with trees and other light and stuff, it got refracted, and that's what they thought they were seeing. But the interesting thing, and what I understand with that lighthouse is different to other types of lighthouses in the sense it doesn't face. The light, when it does go round, doesn't actually face back inland again.
It doesn't. It has a shield on the back of it.
Right.
So there might be a little bit of light that comes through, but it's very minor.
Well, at the same time, it was one of the brightest lighthouses in the UK. So you would probably, if it wasn't facing you, you might get a bit of refracted light or something from the outside.
But it does kind of, I think, saying how bright this was and how far away that lighthouse was.
It's very far away.
You know, it's a long way.
It's
miles away. I think the debunkers have tried to use that as, it was the lighthouse. I don't think it was.
Yeah.
Well, I've got something very interesting, actually, that I came across on this. So, obviously, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, he stuck to his guns, and he eventually, in 2010, he put across a notarized affidavit basically saying that he believes it was an extraterrestrial event, and it had been covered up by both the UK and the US. Now, the base commander at the time, Colonel Ted Conrad, he released a sort of counter statement saying, "We saw nothing that resembled Halt's descriptions. He should be ashamed and embarrassed by his allegation." However, there was actually an article in a 1983 edition of Omni which says, Colonel Ted Conrad, the base commander, interviewed 2 eyewitnesses and concludes, "Those lads saw something, but I don't know what it was."
Yeah.
So at the time, he seemed to be a little more unsure than he is now retrospectively looking at it.
And he didn't see anything either. So he's...
This goes back right to episode 1 of Aliens and Stuff, in my opinion. This goes back to the Phoenix Lights. the governor comes out and goes, I think I saw something. This was paranormal. And again, I'm paraphrasing here. I can't remember the exact quote because I've slept since then, probably drunk as well. But a few days later, he then brings a man in an alien suit out, debunking it and laughing about it. I think that colonel was told to cover it up.
Well, I can link a few more little bits in here.
Okay.
One thing I forgot to mention is when he shot back from the craft on night 1 and the 3 men went back, they lost 45 minutes of time that they couldn't account for.
Yeah, their watches were.
Right, and their watches stopped working. So, we've got a triangular craft, right? Phoenix lights.
Yeah. You could.
And as you mentioned, the mayor incident.
Yeah.
We've got balls of light, okay, on night 2, which fly through, which you can base on Skinwalker and the Owlman. Obviously, right, we look at that. Missing time, Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very true.
So we're looking at a lot of stuff here, which we've covered before, all right, but also which is being reported by trained military personnel, along with backed up dictaphone evidence, right? To turn around and say, I mean, like, you listen to that, you can, it's not just him on his own in the forest, you can hear the other 4, and they haven't just gone out there for a laugh and gone, oh, let's fake some stuff. That'll wreck their careers.
Yeah.
They've gone out there, and there is, it's the only people to turn around and say, oh, it wasn't that, it was this, weren't there.
Yeah, and then you've also got another aspect to this is the unreliable witness, which is Colonel Conrad, who also said that he interviewed Pennison at the time, and Pennison didn't mention any such occurrence as touching the spacecraft. But Conrad keeps flicking between, depending upon which account you read, he's never consistent, whereas the rest of them are.
Why do? I'm just going off on a tangent here again, guys, and I'm sorry about this, but why do aliens, or if you're saying it is Israel, why do they always target Americans? They're in the UK and they're still targeting Americans.
But however, it is a military base. It is a military base, so it would be a place of interest during the Cold War.
True.
And I did read somewhere about there's nuclear arms related stuff at that base.
There was a nuclear weapon there. They've been proven.
So that is one of those things where you think, well, if you were going to come down and have a little look at some stuff, that'd probably be the place that you would go, or maybe conduct some research, maybe. But Pennison, I've listened to a lot of the things that he's come out and said, and he doesn't reckon it was aliens. He reckons it was more interdimensional or time traveling related stuff.
But still,
right?
still
but no, well,
extraterrestrial.
Yeah, but I think
still not of this.
Yeah, still not. Well, unless it's time traveling, then technically is a usurper, not of this time. But because he goes, on that craft I saw it had writing on it, right? Although I couldn't distinguish what it was. He goes, we write on our craft.
It's still
nowadays.
paranormal, isn't it? Is what he's saying.
Yeah, it's still paranormal. But then like you said, like he changes a few little bits of his stuff, and he wasn't there on the second night, and I think maybe something happened with him because obviously the other 2 people corroborated, and you've got the radar link. But I think maybe he's exaggerated some bits.
Yeah. But Burroughs is the guy who was the only guy that was there on both nights.
No, but Burroughs took him to the clearing and he did not go further.
But he saw it come down in the sky.
Yes, but he wasn't there when they chased it.
Burroughs also said that he thinks it was a lighthouse.
Yeah.
In a later interview.
Because Burroughs was like, well, look, I saw the light in the forest, but I didn't go into the forest with the rest of them. He never went in the forest.
Spencer, have you got another theory or another debunking theory on this? Because I know you've done a lot of research.
There's just so many different bits and pieces. So you've got December 2018, David Clark, British UFO researcher, he claimed that it was a hoax set up by the SAS.
See, this is one that I read.
As a revenge plot to the United States Air Force. Do you want to go into a bit more detail?
So, what I understand from this, you'll probably have more information on it than I do, but on that night, SAS guys dropped in using black parachutes.
Yeah.
And were throwing lights around it to get back at the Americans for, and I believe there was an event previously where they arrested a few SAS guys. So they were kind of dropping in.
They arrested them and apparently roughed them up a little bit.
Yeah.
The Air Force did.
But wouldn't you think that was
a bit of a get out of our...
Wouldn't that have come out though a bit more so than what it has? Like that's more.
Well,
it's anecdotal though, isn't it? There's no evidence to back that up.
It's anecdotal. It's completely anecdotal.
We know guys in the military though, and there's pranks that happen all the time.
But that's a bit elaborate. That would, if you were going to parachute, use an aircraft, right? That's forces money. You'd need clearance to do something like that. You can't just go, hey boys, let's jump in a helicopter or something like that and just go and scare out the Americans. It doesn't make sense. You could.
You could
but
say
I don't
I'm
think
going
it
out on
would
a training
happen.
exercise, And then they just go and jump out of
Are
the
you
plane.
honestly
You'd
saying...
have to have a superior's
Yeah,
authorization
you'd have to have a
do
superior's
it, but then
authorization.
then the superior might be in on it.
Yeah, of course
He
he
might
would.
be like, I don't want our SAS
Yeah,
boys
but-
embarrassed by the United States Air Force.
like,
Could
I'm
you
gonna
imagine, though, that superior then having to explain to his superior why he did that? I just can't see it.
Yeah, but it
SAS.
depends on layers of responsibility, doesn't it? I mean, who's to say that he has to report everything to
The
his
SAS
superior?
have pretty much autonomy anyway. They can do what they want. They're you know, they're black ops most.
But I think if there were men in that field, okay, so they're men flying lights in the field, how would they get to a clearing and watch 4 or 5 lights just shoot up and disappear?
Well, the
Which
thing
and
is,
beams of lights coming from lights down to the ground,
then I mean, well,
which you hear on the tape.
well, the timings on Halt's tape recorded on the 28th actually flashed every 5 seconds, which was the flash rate of the Orfordness Lighthouse.
Really?
Yeah.
No, yeah, but again, another thing that happened on that night as well,
Yeah.
which links to Skinwalker, okay, and other sightings that have happened, is animals on the nearby farms.
Yes, acted very strangely.
Incredibly strangely, and they were screaming, like shrieking noises and screaming going
Yeah.
on from these animals. Obviously, radiation was clearly in the air. They had that
Yeah.
on the dictaphones.
And then when it turned up, they went deathly silent.
And they also reported that when they were walking through the woods, it got to a point as they were getting close to these phenomena that it felt like they were walking through or wading through water. Mm-hmm. So that links, I mean, especially the animals links very much to what we were talking about in Skinwalker Ranch episode about the paranormal activity is linked to animals going a bit crazy, like the dogs running off into the distance, the cows, you know, looking extremely like phased out kind of thing. I mean, that does link with other stories that happen
At
around
the
the
same
world.
time, one of the big pieces of wildness in the area are muntjac deer.
Yes.
Now, muntjac deer make a loud, shrill bark, which sounds like a scream when they're alarmed. So if the SAS people ran into a couple of deer, that could well account for the animal noises.
But that wouldn't be something the SAS would do. Because
No,
they would
how
be
do you-
super
how do you
clever,
know
wouldn't they?
that?
They'd be trained for that kind of thing.
What, avoiding deers?
Well, yeah, not being funny. If you hang on. If you're being reported you're being dropped into a war zone and you need to
not a
be
war zone, it's
stealthy.
Rendlesham Forest.
No, but if you need to be super stealthy, the one thing you don't do is run into wild animals and
Yeah,
cause alert.
careful of the deers, boys. You know.
That's like class
Okay,
101, isn't it?
I think the SAS thing is rubbish.
Well,
but
that's not the only example of it being a hoax, though. So the BBC reported that a US security policeman, Kevin Conde, claimed responsibility for it, saying that he drove around in a police vehicle with the lights on at night.
Oh, you'd hear the
But
engine.
you'd hear the engine, and you'd hear the engine on the tape, and it would not fly up in the sky.
And
and also, the lighthouse wouldn't be red, and it wouldn't be blue.
No, but if
Okay.
they lit flares, which allegedly the SAS did, then it would be red.
Yeah,
But
but
another-
you'd have the smoke, and they would know that. They're trained.
But another theory about those lights in the sky that came down, an astronomer, or quite a few astronomers from what I understand, have come out and said that night, which goes back to what Heathrow was saying,
Yes.
that night there was space debris
There was.
that re-entered the atmosphere and came down in that
Which-
area.
And it was sighted over southern England, burning
Yes.
up in the atmosphere
Exactly.
as a fireball.
100%.
I mean,
No, I agree with that. I think that could be that
that's
could
an
be part of it.
explanation for it.
No, but it doesn't follow the following evening, where they've got all the evidence from being in there running around on the dictaphone.
But what they saw on the evening of the 26th on Boxing Day versus what they saw the following night on the 27th, they were two different things.
Different.
They didn't see the triangular craft on the second night.
No.
They saw an eyeball or lights moving around.
But then you would have to turn around and say that it would be a ridiculous coincidence to say that it was space debris falling down and then there was a UFO event the following night just out of coincidence. I mean, yeah, they could be separate. It's not impossible, but it's improbable.
Do you know what I think happened?
Go for
Hit
it.
me.
Unless you've got more to add, Spencer.
I do, but it's not on this train of thought.
My trail of thought is that I think what happened in the first night and what happened in the second night are completely unrelated. The first night, I think there's a lot of credibility in that. The second night, even with the dictaphone stuff, I think that could have been a prank. I think that could have been a prank.
I would just struggle to see how somebody with that amount of experience would be fooled by flares at a lighthouse.
You are right. I mean, Holt has got a fairly high ranking within the US military.
And you can hear his voice. He's like, you know, if a light is shining a beam down,
Yeah.
right, there's no car noise, it's in the sky, and there's like 4 guys running around and chasing it. Like, it just seems like it wouldn't be but basically, people are like, oh, it's a lighthouse, oh, it's a police officer, oh, it's the SAS, maybe it's all 3. It's like, or maybe it's just something that we can't explain.
Are we able to bring up the picture of the craft again? Is that possible?
Yeah, bring the picture
Just
up.
to have a quick look at this. Now, what I find remarkable about this, and this is for other than against, is obviously it's not the same shape in the drawing, but obviously it was dark that night, etc., etc., etc. Die Glocke alleged to have hieroglyphic type symbols.
The Vril, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the acorn, which was spotted, alleged to have hieroglyphic type symbols on it. So I do think it's remarkable that their description of the craft matches up to so many other descriptions, which would probably at that time would not have been as well known.
During the
Am I
Cold
right in
War
think-
as well.
Yeah.
And in Kecksburg, didn't it have like when it landed, it was like a soft like red glow coming from the woods, wasn't there? So
And we will do episodes
we will
on
do
that.
Kecksburg.
We are
'cause
covering
that's
even
Kecksburg and Die Glocke at some point.
Might
I think that's
do-
a joint episode, isn't it? Because that is very closely
You know,
related.
for
That's a
Chris-
very good point.
For Christmas, we might even do a Jingle Bells version of it with obviously
Jingle
the
Bell.
Glocke, which is the bell. So we will certainly do that. But there is a picture which we will put up, overlay after we edit the show, of an actual replica of what they saw, that is in the forest now, on what's called the UFO trail. So it actually does a trail.
Well, yeah, because the base isn't there anymore. It's been decommissioned, isn't it?
So there is actually a replica of what they saw, and it does look a little bit like Die Glocke. I think that's a really good.
It does look like Die Glocke, and if it's triangular based as well, all our stealth craft triangular based as well. So if it was like time travel-y, for example, then that would be the kind of shape that we would use, black.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in the hieroglyphics thing that we saw. I do.
The Vril's very interesting.
I think that the links with kind of ancient Egypt, and everyone always talks about kind of, you know, aliens and you know, helping the Egyptians and building the pyramids and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not saying at all for a second that this is real, but there we go.
It's looking at the commonalities between the cases. That's the thing. And I mean, you know, obviously we've talked about how it relates to Skinwalker, Betty and Barney Hill, how it relates to the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah.
There's so many commonalities in it.
It's almost like a tick box exercise. Is if there was going to be something that was paranormal, right, and it had to have all of the things that we've previously discussed. This ticks all of those boxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this up then. What do you think it is, Spence? Paranormal, normal?
I mean, to be honest, just purely based on the description of the hieroglyphics, paranormal.
Okay, Tom?
It's 100% paranormal. There's too much here for it to be a hoax or a prank or a lighthouse. And especially with that, you know, with that dictaphone evidence, and, you know, we look at, you know, his lights stopped working and there's radiation, there's indentations in the ground, multiple witnesses. How can you turn around and say that that's not something didn't happen? It's definitely paranormal.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with both of you.
Okay.
I think it's normal. Reason for that is, I think first night it was space debris. I think second night it was a prank. Maybe from people on the base that had heard about what they'd seen the night before and decided to play a prank, or the SAS. I think completely normal.
Or the USAF policeman who claimed it was a hoax.
Yeah, I think it's normal.
I mean, it's worth mentioning as well.
There's too many theories, debunking theories, that I think when you add them all up, debunk it fully, in my opinion.
The one last thing I'll say, if it was so easy to debunk and it was a hoax, then why did the US and the UK make it top secret?
Because it's military. Because they would make it secret.
Yeah, but if it's a lighthouse, why make that top secret?
I didn't think it was top secret.
It got released as part of the Freedom of Information Act.
True, but the case files themselves weren't classified, were they?
We could go on about this all night. I genuinely think.
It's paranormal.
It's paranormal then.
So okay, I've been outvoted. It's paranormal.
Paranormal.
Guys, what do you think? Please sound off in the comments, and please also make sure you
like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon.
Thanks very much for watching, guys. Catch up with you next time.
Thank you.